Happy Sunday, everybody. Today we're talking about whether there will be a so-called Mormon Rapture, or what many people call tent cities. This idea that in the latter days, with all the calamities, there will be a call out of the righteous who will flee into the mountains or the wilderness or some location reserved just for those who have heeded the call, and they'll have tent cities, and people have claimed to have had dreams about this and visions and all kinds of things. So let's dig into it a little bit. I think the term itself originates from 1 Kings 12. This is where we read in verse 16, "So when all Israel saw that the king Rehoboam hearkened not unto them, the people answered the king, saying, What portion have we in David? Neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to thine own house, David." So Israel departed unto their tents. And that term has been used by a few early church leaders here and there, including Joseph Smith in 1834. Here's what he said. "If, verily I say unto you, if the church, with one united effort, perform their duties, if they do this, the work shall be complete. If they do not this, in all humility, making preparation from this time forth, like Joseph in Egypt, laying up store against the time of famine, every man having his tent, his horses, his chariots, his armory, his cattle, his family, and his whole substance in readiness against the time when it shall be said, To your tents, O Israel. Let not this be noised abroad. Let every heart beat in silence and every mouth be shut." In other words, kind of keep this on the down low. He continues, "Now, my beloved brethren, you will learn by this we have a great work to do, and but little time to do it in. And if we do not exert ourselves to the utmost in gathering up the strength of the Lord's house, that this thing may be accomplished, behold, there remaineth a scourge for the church, even that they shall be driven from city to city, and but few shall remain to receive an inheritance. If those things are not kept, there remaineth a scourge also. Therefore be wise this once, ye children of Zion, and give heed to my counsel, saith the Lord." So this concept of, to your tents, O Israel, and we have to, do this work and be prepared and ready to be called out, having your tent, your horses, your chariots, your cattle, your family, basically have provisions and be ready for such a time as, you may need to flee if we don't do what we're supposed to in one united effort. The scriptures are full of examples of the righteous being called out from the wicked. I'm going to go over a few of these, and then we're going to get into what does this mean for us today? How relevant are these scriptures and these use cases? For example, Noah, obviously, Genesis 7, the Lord said unto Noah, "Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and the creeping things, and the fowl of heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth, and Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark." That's quite the call out, right? Hey, I'm going to flood the earth. Of course, the earth might have been localized to the area in which they lived and not actually the whole globe. 40 days and 40 nights is likely a figurative number that just means a long time. Nonetheless, there's a period of destruction, and there's a preparation and a call out for the righteous. Another example, Jaredites being led out of their native lands to a land of promise. This is in Ether 1. "And it came to pass that Jared spake again unto his brother, saying, Go and inquire of the Lord whether he will drive us out of the land. And if he will drive us out of the land, cry unto him whether we shall go. And who knoweth but the Lord will carry us forth into a land which is choice above all the earth. And if it so be, let us be faithful unto the Lord, that we may receive it for our inheritance. And it came to pass that the Lord did hear the brother of Jared, and had compassion upon him, and said unto him, Go to, and gather together thy flocks, both male and female of every kind, and also of the seed of the earth of every kind, and thy families, and also Jared thy brother and his family, and also thy friends and their families, and the friends of Jared and their families." So, hey, I'm going to lead you away elsewhere. Prepare, get your family members, get your friends, get as many as people will listen. Kind of a Noah-like adventure, preparing animals and seeds and all kinds of stuff. Abraham fled several times from Ur to Haran, from Haran to a land of promise, and then into Egypt. Abraham, too, is an example. Now the Lord God caused the famine to wax sore in the land of Ur, insomuch that Haran, my brother, died. But Terah, my father, yet lived in the land of Ur of the Chaldees. Now the Lord said unto me, Abraham, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. But I, Abraham, and Lot, my brother's son, prayed unto the Lord, and the Lord appeared unto me, and said unto me, Arise, and take Lot with thee, for I have purposed to take thee away out of Haran, and to make of thee a minister to bear my name in a strange land, which I will give unto thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession when they hearken to my voice. Lot, he mentioned Lot. Lot is another example of a call-out. He fled into the wilderness to avoid the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is in Genesis 19. And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men, or angels, laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth and set him without the city. And it came to pass, when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, Escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And then later in the chapter, then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and that which grew upon the ground. Of course, we know what happened to Lot's wife, turning to a pillar of salt because she didn't heed the counsel of these angels/holy men, and was turned apparently to a pillar of salt, if you believe the story literally. Point being that Lot and his family are spared. They're called out directly by the Lord to escape to the mountain, lest they be consumed. Another example: Moses guiding the children of Israel out of Egypt into the wilderness and a land of promise. So in Exodus, of course, we read about the Passover. God ends up smiting the firstborn of Egyptian families. Every house is affected. Pharaoh and everyone are wildly upset, as you might imagine. Israelites then, upon God's command, get out of Dodge. Verse 31, and he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, Rise up and get you forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go, serve the Lord as ye have said. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men, beside children. So call out, hey, I'm raining down all this destruction on the Egyptians. It's time for you to get out. Lehi and company fleeing from Jerusalem to a land of promise. Beginning in the book of Mormon, chapter 2 of 1 Nephi. For behold, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto my father, yea, even in a dream, and said unto him, Blessed art thou, Lehi, because of the things which thou hast done, and because thou hast been faithful, and declared unto this people the things which I commanded thee. Behold, they seek to take away thy life. And it came to pass that the Lord commanded my father, even in a dream, that he should take his family and depart into the wilderness. And it came to pass that he was obedient unto the word of the Lord, wherefore he did as the Lord had commanded him. And it came to pass that he departed into the wilderness, and he left his house and the land of his inheritance, his gold, his silver, his precious things, took nothing with him, save it were his family and provisions and tents, and departed into the wilderness. Of course, that's where we get the shortest verse in the Book of Mormon, and my father dwelt in a tent. Nephi, of course, himself fled from destruction at the hands of his wicked brothers, fleeing into the wilderness himself. 2 Nephi chapter 5. And it came to pass that the Lord did warn me that I, Nephi, should depart from them and flee into the wilderness, and all those who would go with me. Wherefore it came to pass that I, Nephi, to take my family, and also Zoram and his family, Sam, mine elder brother, and his family, and Jacob and Joseph, my younger brethren, also my sisters, and all those who would go with me. And all those who would go with me were those who believed in the warnings and the revelations of God, wherefore they did hearken unto my words. And we did take our tents, and whatsoever things were possible for us, and did journey into the wilderness for the space of many days. And after we had journeyed for the space of many days, we did pitch our tents. Of course, Joseph and Mary, Jesus' mother, flee into Egypt at the admonishment of God, recorded in Matthew 2. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt. Again, a call out prior to a destruction. A couple more examples, and then we'll move on. Alma fled into the wilderness several times to avoid destruction and slavery. Under King Noah's reign, of course, in chapter 18 of Mosiah, It says, "It came to pass that Alma and the people of the Lord were apprised of the coming of the king's army. Therefore they took their tents and their families and departed into the wilderness." Well, that's a passive voice, right? They were apprised. Who were they apprised by? Perhaps spies, perhaps, Alma and the people of the Lord's. I mean, they're not a military. They're not, Alma's not a general, but maybe they had some kind of spy network to, guards to keep watch around the waters of Mormon and so forth, right? Maybe that's how they were apprised of the coming of the king's army. Well, it's not true. A few chapters later, chapter 23, we read, "Now Alma, having been warned of the Lord that the armies of King Noah would come upon them, and having made it known to his people, therefore they gathered together their flocks and took of their grain and departed into the wilderness before the armies of King Noah." That's both referring to the same event. So the Lord is directly warning Alma, hey, time to flee into the wilderness and escape this attack. Later, under the kind of brutal reign of Amulon, Mosiah chapter 24, "The Lord said unto Alma, Thou shalt go before this people, and I will go with thee, and deliver this people out of bondage. Now it came to pass that Alma and his people in the nighttime gathered their flocks together, and also of their grain. Yea, even all the nighttime they were gathering their flocks together. And in the morning the Lord caused a deep sleep to come upon the Lamanites. Yea, and all their taskmasters were in a profound sleep. And Alma and his people departed into the wilderness. And when they had traveled all day, they pitched their tents in a valley, called the valley Alma, because he led their way in the wilderness." Now, Jesus himself warned of a future call-out in the days of the abomination of desolation, the kind of apocalyptic future events prior to his second coming. This is recorded in Matthew 24. "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes." In other words, you got to flee. You got to flee destruction. There's other examples, right? There's, Mulek during the reign of Zedekiah. There's Enoch, Moses 7, when God says, "In my hot displeasure will I send the floods upon them, for my fierce anger is kindled upon them." Well, not so for Enoch and the righteous who are called up. Mosiah, we read in the book of Omni, it says that Mosiah was warned of the Lord that he should flee out of the land of Nephi, and as many as would hearken unto the voice of the Lord should also depart out of the land with him into the wilderness. Okay, it's a lot of scriptures. The point being that there is strong precedent for this pattern of the Lord calling people to flee and escape prior to some aspect of destruction or attack, had they remained. And this is established, frankly, as the Lord's pattern in 1 Nephi 17. There we read, "Behold, the Lord esteemeth all flesh in one. He that is righteous is favored of God. But behold, this people had rejected every word of God, and they were ripe in iniquity. And the fullness of the wrath of God was upon them. And the Lord did curse the land against them, and bless it unto our fathers. Yea, he did curse it against them unto their destruction, and he did bless it unto our fathers unto their obtaining power over it. And he leadeth away the righteous into precious lands, and the wicked he destroyeth, and curseth the land unto them for their sakes." He leads away the righteous. Right? This is the pattern. This is what the Lord does. He esteems all flesh in one, but righteous people are favored of God, and because of that favored status, and because everyone else is rejecting God, he leads away the righteous before he destroys the wicked. There are many other cases, presumably, that we are unaware of. 2 Nephi 10 says, "For behold, the Lord has led away from time to time from the house of Israel according to his will and pleasure. And now behold, the Lord remembereth all them who have been broken off, wherefore he remembereth us also." So there's potentially and certainly likely additional cases where the Lord has led people away, called them out to have kind of a transplant of a righteous branch in the Lord's vineyard. Joseph Smith, again, 1834, speaking of Zion, this need for a gathering, this need for the righteous coming together to be called out from among the wicked, he said, "Without Zion and a place of deliverance, we must fall, because the time is near when the sun will be darkened, and the moon turned to blood, and the stars fall from heaven, and the earth reel to and fro." Then, if this is the case, and if we're not sanctified and gathered to the places God has appointed with all our former professions and our great love for the Bible, we must fall. We cannot stand. We cannot be saved. For God will gather out his saints from the Gentiles, and then comes desolation and destruction, and none can escape except the pure in heart who are gathered. God will gather out his saints from the Gentiles, and then comes the desolation and destruction. In other words, there's a gathering prior to the destruction that comes. And who escapes? Those who are pure in heart, Zion, the pure in heart, who are gathered together. So we talk about Zion in the Latter-day Church, and we say that we're trying to build Zion, and Zion is a united people. Are we a united people? If we're trying to avoid the destruction of the wicked and be among the righteous who are potentially called out, this Mormon Rapture idea, right, that the righteous are going to be, called out from among the wicked, are we united? Here's Ezra Taft Benson. Sometimes we hear someone refer to a division in the church. In reality, the church is not divided. It simply means that there are some who, for the time being at least, are members of the church but not in harmony with it. These people have a temporary membership and influence in the church, but unless they repent, they will be missing when the final membership records are recorded. It's wild that our people understand this principle, so they'll not be misled by those apostates within the church who have not yet repented or been cut off. But there is a cleansing coming. The Lord says that his vengeance shall be poured out upon the inhabitants of the earth, and upon my house shall it begin. And from my house shall it go forth, saith the Lord. First among those among you, saith the Lord, who have professed to know my name and have not known me. Benson continues, and that's from section 112, by the way. He continues, I look forward to that cleansing. Its need within the church is becoming increasingly apparent. Now, I'm going to separately do a musing on those verses in section 112 because they're extremely powerful and relevant and shocking, and will be interesting to muse on what they mean for us today about upon my house shall it begin and from my house shall it go forth. So separate musing some other time. But I want to mention another verse in the Doctrine and Covenants, this one from section 124. It says, For the day of my visitation cometh speedily, in an hour when ye think not of. And where shall be the safety of my people, and refuge for those who shall be left of them? So the Scriptures and Joseph Smith make very clear that Zion is a place of refuge. He said, Joseph calls it a place of deliverance, that the saints need to gather to, that there's going to be a gathering, that there's going to be a fortification. So what does all this mean for us today? There's all these examples in the Scripture of people fleeing to the wilderness and getting out of Dodge and escaping, calamity and corruption. Well, I think there's a scriptural and a physical element to this. Certainly on the scriptural side, in terms of being called out from among the wicked, we've been already called to do so, fleeing Babylon. I think of Isaiah 52. It says, Depart ye, go out from thence, touch no unclean thing, go ye out of the midst of her. And that can have a physical component for sure, but certainly has a spiritual component, that not everyone can or should or is going to leave physically to try and escape Babylon. Babylon is everywhere. It's in every corner and crevice of society as much as we're trying to build Zion. And so there's spiritual implications for us to be called out from among the wicked, not necessarily relocating, but being separate, touching not the unclean thing, living in this community, in this society that's degraded, but spiritually not being a part, being above that, being, not being affected by it. But to me, the Scriptures focus on the physical separation, the physical calling out. And what I find interesting about the scriptural examples, that it's almost always a minority that did so, leaving the other church members of their time in many cases, right? And I think of Jesus' parable about the virgins. It was only 50%, right? That's not a great track record. Back to President Benson, he said that the Lord has warned us of famines, but the righteous will have listened to prophets and stored at least a year's supply of survival food. In the same talk, he said, the revelation to store food may be as essential to our temporal salvation today as boarding the ark was to the people in the days of Noah. That would sift out a lot of saints, is if there was a circumstance in which, we had to live off, actually, like for a prolonged period, live off of food storage. Estimates suggest somewhere between 3 to 5% of Latter-day Saints have any level of preparation, getting close to a year's supply. Of course, in international, Latter-day Saint communities, it's even less. This has predominantly been historically a kind of an American focus and middle-class focus. But buying preparations, buying prepper goods does not guarantee you a spot in Zion, right? There's plenty of temporally prepared people who are not spiritually prepared. So it can't just be store up your rice and beans and wheat and you'll weather the storm and be part of the Mormon Rapture tent city, right? That's clearly not the case. And I don't think the point now is to go to a previously undiscovered land, like Jared and the brother of Jared, or like Lehi and Nephi, like a lot of these people, right, being called out to go to some distant location, to go to some new wilderness area separate from everyone else. I think rather the calling out concept, getting back to the spiritual component of this, is that it's separating the wheat from the tares, that there has to be a separation for the tares to be, according to the parable, for the tares to be plucked up and not remove also the wheat. There has to be a separation of some kind. And maybe that can be strictly spiritual, but it seems to me that the scriptures are very clear about a physical separation. But what does that mean for Latter-day Saints in, the Philippines or South Africa? I mean, it's one thing to think, I live in the Wasatch Front in Utah, and we're going to go up into the mountains right? And when it says, upon my house shall it begin, does that mean predominantly Utah, where the saints kind of congregated and where headquarters is? Maybe, right? Or does it mean something else because saints are living all around the world, increasingly more outside of the United States than in? This perhaps is what led President Kimball in 1975 to say, the gathering of Israel is effected when the people of the faraway countries accept the gospel and remain in their native lands. The gathering of Israel for Mexicans is in Mexico, in Scandinavia for those of the northern countries. The gathering place for the Germans is in Germany, and the Polynesians in the islands, for the Brazilians in Brazil, for the Argentines in Argentina. He's saying the gathering of Israel is no longer everyone emigrating to one place, and going to eventually to Missouri after we settle in Utah. He's saying the gathering of Israel is where you live, stay put. We're doing this all around the world now and no longer emigrating to one specific location. And then, to which I say, sure, fine for now, but that doesn't say, Kimball himself didn't say, that it will always be so, right? So in the 70s, perhaps it was that, perhaps it's still that now. Who was it? I think President Nelson himself years ago might have gone to California, some member of the First Presidency, I just don't remember who off the top of my head, but told the saints in California, stay in California because so many of them are leaving and they're shrinking wards and understandably so. Families want to live in a better environment for their kids and not be in a, more polarized Babylonian type society. And yet you have church leaders saying, stay where you are, try and build up Zion, in your community. But that doesn't mean it will always be so. We can concede that that's the policy and the, position of the church right now, but that doesn't mean God wants it forever and thus to be, always like that. That there may be a future time when the saints around the world are going to be called out. Maybe that means multiple gathering locations. Maybe there's a call out of saints around the world in different contexts and locations. It doesn't mean there has to be one place for every Latter-day Saint, or if there's like regionalized conflict or war or whatever, the calamities are more focused on Western nations, maybe the call out pertains to them. But if you live in New Zealand, maybe you're okay to ride out the calamities a little more there, so you're not getting it could be this kind of more multiple location, hyper local, regional, type of thing. Plenty of scriptures suggest that there's going to be some type of Latter-day gathering precedent to prior to the kind of major apocalyptic calamities. So here's section 45 of Doctrine and Covenants. And with one heart and with one mind gather up your riches, that you may purchase an inheritance which shall hereafter be appointed unto you. And it shall be called the New Jerusalem, a land of peace, a city of refuge, a place of safety for the saints of the Most High God. And the glory of the Lord shall be there, and the terror of the Lord shall also be there, insomuch that the wicked will not come unto it, and it shall be called Zion. And it shall come to pass among the wicked that every man that will not take his sword against his neighbor must needs flee unto Zion for safety. And there shall be gathered unto it out of every nation under heaven, and it shall be the only people that shall not be at war one with another. And it shall be said among the wicked, let us not go up to battle against Zion, for the inhabitants of Zion are terrible, wherefore we cannot stand. And it shall come to pass that the righteous shall be gathered out from among all the nations, and shall come to Zion singing with songs of everlasting joy. So that, when the big call out is happening, it's very clear that the righteous will be gathered out from among all nations, and will come to Zion, a city of refuge, a singular location, a place of safety for the saints of the Most High God. where the glory of the Lord will be there, the terror of the Lord will be there. The wicked don't want to get near it because apparently we've got, the Lord on our side and can clearly defend ourselves, whether with, traditional munitions and defense or using, God's power, however that looks. So, fine. There's going to be a call out of some kind at some point. Right now, you're staying put, but at some point, the righteous will be gathered out from among all the nations and come to Zion. What that looks like when it happens, we don't know, but it seems clear to me that the pattern is clear in the Scriptures, and the Scriptures themselves say it's going to happen again. Now, I think despite all of that, there needs to be a level of caution, because in the prepper-type last days Latter-day Saint community, there can be a lot of weirdos that claim visions and build up little followings and write books and start communities and go down weird paths. Here's a video of just a recent example to show you.
A missing 16-year-old boy from Gilbert has been found safe after a desperate search through Idaho and Canada last week. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for 12 News at 6. I'm Rachel McNeil.
I'm Jonathan McCall. Mark and Caribe are on assignment tonight. 12 News brought you breaking news Friday night when that boy's mother and uncle were both arrested near the Alaska-Canadian border. Spring Thibodeau and Brooke Hale are now both accused of custodial interference. Court records show they believed that they were chosen by God in a doomsday prophecy and tried to hide from loved ones.
12 News I-Team journalist Joe Dana is here now with other high-profile cases in Arizona tied to the religious belief. Joe?
Luckily, that teen involved is safe. In a goodbye letter to the family last week, the uncle, Brooke Hale, wrote about the theology of his faith, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly referred to as the Mormon Church. Hale also said he was specifically chosen by God for a special purpose. Authorities have heard that before. A Gilbert family split apart. A group of them skips town, taking a 16-year-old boy with them without telling the boy's father.
He is in no way a supporter of anything she's ever believed.
On Friday, before his son was found, Ben Thibodeau said his family members, including his wife, were delusional.
Getting into these dark topics has really corrupted them in a really horrible way.
A line that stands out in court records, especially chilling, referring to another East Valley family. Quote, mother started forming beliefs in end-of-the-world scenarios, eerily similar to the well-publicized Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell saga, which culminated in murdered children.
These are people that would have never been able to seek those extremist ideas in the past. So I think that they're just much more widely available.
Journalist Leah Sotilli writes about fringe religious ideologies in the Western U.S. and is author of a book about the Vallow-Daybell case, When the Moon Turns to Blood. Sotilli says there is a movement among some members of the LDS mainstream church to follow doomsday teachings not officially endorsed by the church in Salt Lake City.
So like Idaho, Utah, Arizona, there seems to be kind of this pipeline of conferences and authors and this culture that is very fringe but kind of masquerades as mainstream.
That movement, she says, has grown in recent years because of the pandemic and political tensions. The teachings emphasize an impending apocalypse, the need to prepare with supplies, and the ability of lay church members to receive visions from God and angels. According to court records, in a letter to his family before disappearing last week, Brooke Hale wrote, I have been called to assist in preparing the way for his return. The things I have learned will not be taught at the pulpit in church.
And it certainly sounds like from everything that has been happening is that they were reading and talking about the exact same things that the Bundys, that Vallow-Daybell, that Tim Ballard were talking about. Things like the Davidic servant, visions of an apocalyptic, situation in America.
There was the armed standoff between the Bundy rancher family and the feds in 2016, lasting 40 days.
This can't happen anymore. This can't happen in America, and it can't happen in Harney County.
Arizona militia member Lavoy Finicum was killed by police and declared a martyr by followers.
Their, standoffs with the federal government were motivated by their interpretation of LDS scriptures.
More recently, author and activist Tim Ballard has been in the spotlight. Ballard portrays himself as an anti-sex trafficking crusader and launched a film about himself this past summer, Sound of Freedom. According to former associates of Ballard, he told them he received visions from a Book of Mormon prophet, and has declared himself not just an activist, but a prophet figure for the end times. Ballard is now accused by 7 women who worked with him of sexual assault and misconduct. Former supporters also accuse him of misusing donations.
Where he found footing for himself was on the very same set of prepper conferences in St. George, Utah, in Arizona, in Boise, Idaho, where people were getting together to talk about these ideas.
Ideas that portray the world in a stark contrast of good versus evil and motivate some to go to extremes. The LDS Church officially disavowed any association with Tim Ballard in September. Ballard denies any accusations of wrongdoing. The LDS Church discourages its members from affiliating with extremist organizations. The Church did not respond for comment to this story. Joe Dana, 12 News.
All right, so we got to tread lightly here because you don't want to end up, going down these weird rabbit holes and getting super extreme and being completely wrong. So that leads many Latter-day Saints to be in a passive condition as it relates to this issue, right? I don't know when the Latter-day calamities are going to happen. I don't know when the second coming is. I'm just going to wait to be told what to do. Kind of the slothful servant approach, right? And in this case, okay, maybe the righteous will be called out. We just are going to wait to hear when that is. And they're supported in that position by then Elder Harold Lee, who said, clearly the Lord has placed the responsibility for directing the work of gathering in the hands of the leaders of the church, to whom he will reveal his will, where and when such gatherings would take place in the future. It would be well, before the frightening events concerning the fulfillment of all God's promises and predictions are upon us, that the saints in every land prepare themselves and look forward to the instruction that shall come to them from the first presidency of this church as to where they shall be gathered, and not be disturbed in their feelings until such instruction is given to them as it is revealed by the Lord to the proper authority. So Elder Lee's position, perhaps referring to this massive call out at the end where the righteous will be called out of all nations that we just read about in section 45, perhaps he's saying this global gathering to Zion isn't going to happen until the first presidency of the church says so. And I can concede that. That makes sense, right? But there's other call outs that are not necessarily that. The scriptural examples I shared, none of them have the established church authorities of any kind involved in orchestrating this call out. The call outs came directly from the Lord. The Lord directly warned these people. And so that perhaps opens up the opportunity for there to be more localized call outs, for the Lord to be gathering people in kind of one-offs that, hey, I need you and your family and friends to get out of Dodge because this thing is going to happen in your neck of the woods. Maybe it's not the global, call out before we all go to actual Zion and the city of refuge. But there could be other, I'll call them mini call outs, where the Lord will call people. It could be as simple as saying, hey, I want your family to move, to this different location. Because had you stayed there, your kids would have, abandoned the faith and got mixed up in bad stuff, or you yourself would have, or, it could be more benign type normal issues like that, but it can certainly be something much bigger, as we see in the scriptural examples I shared. But all of that is to say, maybe it won't happen. That's certainly the position of Elder Holland, who in a 2012 devotional said as much. Take a listen.
For more than 4,000 years of covenantal history, this has been the pattern. Flee and seek, run and settle, escape Babylon, build Zion's protective walls. Until now. Until tonight, until this, our day. One of the truly exciting things about this dispensation is that it is a time of mighty, accelerated change. And one thing that has changed is that the church of God will never again flee. It will never again leave Ur in order to leave Haran, in order to leave Canaan, in order to leave Jerusalem, in order to leave England, in order to leave Kirtland, in order to leave Nauvoo, in order to go who knows where. We no longer think of Zion as where we are going to live. We think of it as how we are going to live. Now, to frame this new task just a little, I wish to draw tonight upon 3 incidents Sister Holland and I have experienced.
Okay, so Zion, he's saying, is no longer where we're going to live, despite the scriptures calling it a specific city of refuge to which the the righteous among all the nations would be, gathered, but instead how we're going to live. Maybe this is like the President Kimball quote, right? The gathering for Mexicans is Mexico, and Brazil, and so forth, where sure, that's the policy now, but it doesn't necessarily close the door completely. Although the way Holland's talking about it, right? Until now, until this, our day, this is a change in the modern dispensation that we're not going anywhere anymore. He's presenting this with a bit more finality, and to say that it's not going to happen. Except if he's saying that about the modern dispensation, that would certainly refer as well to the earlier part of this modern dispensation. And yet the saints had to flee multiple times, before destruction. And the Lord directly called them to do so. Think of, D&C 37 about Kirtland. I say unto you that it is not expedient in me that you should translate any more until you shall go to the Ohio, and this because of the enemy and for your sakes. Far West, section 115. And the gathering together upon the land of Zion and upon her stakes may be for a defense and for a refuge from the storm and from wrath when it shall be poured out without mixture upon the whole earth. Let the city far west be a holy and consecrated land unto me, and it shall be called most holy, for the ground upon which thou standest is holy. So there seems to be, Fayette and Independence and Illinois. Finally, the saints going west to the Rockies under Brigham. You can make an argument that in the modern dispensation there have been call-outs of various types directed by the Lord. Remember what Joseph himself said, without a Zion and a place of deliverance, we must fall. God, he said, will gather out his saints from the Gentiles. Now, perhaps all of this is just referring to some final apocalyptic thing that the Doctrine and Covenants was talking about, but other than that, until that happens, until, according to Elder Lee, the first presidency orchestrates the whole thing, stay put, don't be anxious about it, right? Because he said, don't be disturbed in your feelings until that instruction comes. And to me, I guess I think in conclusion that regardless of a call out from God, either through his the leaders of his church or directly from the Lord to various people, regardless of that, there will be tent cities. Because when you read the calamities that are happening in the latter days, even just ones that are not necessarily part of the calamities, but just earthquakes and, fires and all kinds of stuff, there are tent cities, right? Any event that results in a number of refugees, whether it's persecution or otherwise, some, big calamitous natural event, there's tent cities. So I don't know. Clearly, it's different if the Lord is orchestrating it versus just kind of a more natural response. But I think it would behoove us well to, be prepared for these things. Like Joseph said, having your provisions ready, being prepared for such a time that the Lord directly or church leaders more generally say, hey, it's time to do this. There seems to be scriptural precedent for a physical calling out of various kinds. In next week's musing, I'm going to do kind of a part 2 to this. I want to take Elder Holland at face value and say, kind of steelman his position and say, okay, he's correct. And if he's correct that what I just outlined is no longer relevant, that we're not doing a physical call out, that what happened for 4,000 years of covenantal history doesn't apply in a literal physical sense to today. Let's take Elder Holland's position. And with that position, let's try and understand, how do we flee or fight Babylon while staying put? How do we depart, go out from thence, touch no unclean thing, as Isaiah said, if we're not relocating to separate the wheat from the tares? Maybe a call out happens, maybe it doesn't. How do we spiritually survive? How are we called out from Babylon while living in Babylon? How do we be, in the world, but not of the world? What does that look like in a kind of a more practical and real sense? So that'll be next week, taking Holland kind of at his word as the authoritative position here, and then setting aside all the other scriptures and counsel, which suggests that there will be at some point a global call out of the saints, perhaps in addition to individual call-outs, mini call-outs that, God directly orchestrates for his purposes. So we'll talk about that next week, the more spiritual aspects. This week, really, I think there is strong scriptural precedent for some type of physical calling out, especially the big kahuna, right? But also leaving the door open for the Lord to orchestrate his affairs as he please and move people like this sounds bad, but like pawns on a chessboard, right? Like move this family here. Hey, I need you to be here to fulfill my purposes, and calling them out from among the wicked so that they can do this important mission. The scriptures are full of examples. I think that means that it can and perhaps is happening in our day. I'd love to know what you think in the comments. Certainly, we don't want to go to extremes. We don't want to, go nuts here. We don't want to fall into these traps that some of these Latter-day Saints do, thinking that, oh, the end of the world is tomorrow, and therefore we got to do this. Or, hey, this person that wrote this book is this authoritative figure. Let's hang on their every word and the visions they've claimed to have and all that kind of stuff, right? We got to be cautious here. There's false prophets. There's all kinds of people saying, follow me, and lo here and lo there. But the scriptures are clear, and there's been many such cases. And certainly if you are the wheat living among the tares, you would love to be gathered out so you're no longer among the tares, and you can, have community and collaborate with other wheat and no longer have to be kind of contaminated with all the tares. So it seems to me that there is precedent, that it's very clear that a physical gathering of some kind, especially the big event that Section 45 talked about, will be happening at some point. I think our task is to prepare for that, not doing necessarily anything now, but perhaps waiting for either God to tell us something directly or for the leaders of the church to tell us something directly. But we want to be like the wise virgins who are prepared, not just temporally with our lamps, but we need them filled with the spiritual oil. We need to be prepared both spiritually and temporally for these events. It's not enough to buy your prepper stuff, your bug out bag, your tent, your generator, your buckets of weed and all that. Like, fine, do that. That's good. If you're prepared, you shall not fear. But there has to be a spiritual component to this as well. We have to be spiritually prepared in addition to temporally prepared for whenever God wants to move us around on the chessboard, whether us individually and our family or the saints or Bradley. Tell me what you think in the comments. I'd love to get your guys' perspective on this. And we'll see you next week when we talk about the more spiritual side and what it means to fight or flee Babylon while staying put within it. See you next week.